Most serious mistakes don't begin with bad intent. They begin as reasonable decisions made with incomplete information. And that's uncomfortable because we like to believe that when things go badly, it must have been obvious, that someone must have ignored a warning, that a smarter person would have seen it coming. But if it had been obvious then, it wouldn't have happened. The truth is, most of the time, people are doing the best with what they know, under pressure, with limited time, and with consequences they can't see yet. And from inside the moment, the choice usually feels defensible. It feels responsible, which is why history is full of decisions that look baffling in hindsight. But in the moment of choice, they were perfectly reasonable. There's a phrase we use when we don't want to look too closely at a bad decision. It made sense at the time. Well, we usually say it like an excuse, like a way of closing the file and moving on. But most of the time, it's true. It did make sense, given what was known, what was visible, and what was feared in that moment. The problem isn't that it made sense. The problem is when the reasons for the decision stopped being updated. Decisions don't fail all at once. They age, and sometimes they age poorly. They drift out of alignment with reality. They outlive the conditions and facts that justified them. And then one day they fail spectacularly, not because they were necessarily foolish, but because they were not revised in time. And that's when we look back and say, how could anyone have thought that was a good idea? Which brings us to a part that's usually going to get misunderstood. Consider a person trapped on a high floor of a burning building. Smoke is filling the room. The heat is rising. The stairwell is blocked. That person breaks a window and throws a chair out into the street below. From the sidewalk, that looks a little unhinged. Why would anyone throw furniture out of a burning building? But inside the moment, there's a logic at work. How far is the fall? How hard does the chair hit the ground? What happens when something that size meets the pavement? It's not panic. It's an experiment. The chair becomes an analog for their own body, a way of turning an impossible decision into a measurable one. Now consider the passengers on the Titanic. Some of them refused lifeboat seats. Looking back, that seems incomprehensible. The ship was sinking. The lifeboats were right there. But in the moment, on deck, the ship still looks stable. The lights are on, and the ocean is black and cold. The lifeboats look fragile. The ship feels solid, for now. So people wait. Not because they're foolish, but because they're calibrating risk with the only information they have. And finally, consider a financial bubble. A market that keeps rising. Everyone making money. Smart people buying in. Media calling it a new era. From the collapse, it looks absurd. How could anyone believe prices would go up forever? But inside the moment, it feels like proof. The gains look real. The confidence is contagious. The crowd feels like confirmation. So people don't ask when it ends. They ask, how can I get in on this? In every one of those three cases, the same thing is happening. Information is incomplete. Time is compressed. The stakes feel high. And the brain does what it always does. It builds the most reasonable story it can from the pieces it has. From the outside, it looks insane. From the inside, it makes sense. Looking back, it seems foolish. In that moment, it looks foolish not to get in. After the fact, something strange happens to our memory. The missing information disappears, the uncertainty fades, the pressure dissolves, and the outcome starts to feel inevitable. Of course that's what happened. How could we miss it? We look back at a decision and forget what it was like to stand inside it. We forget what wasn't known. We forget what couldn't be seen. We forget what hadn't happened yet. Instead, we judge the moment as if the ending had been obvious all along. We mistake knowing the ending for believing it was obvious. That's how complexity gets flattened into a single bad choice. That's how we become cruel to people who were doing their best with the map that they had at hand, which was incomplete, still being drawn. Hindsight doesn't just make us confident. Sometimes it makes us unfair. Here's the part that usually gets missed. Things stop going wrong if people can change their minds. They go wrong when they can't. Mistakes are survivable. Error is correctable. Bad decisions can be reversed. But what can't be recovered from is rigidity. The moment a person, a system, or an institution becomes unreachable by new information, then the die is cast. Not because the mistake happened, but because correction became impossible. That's the difference between learning and collapse. Everyone has one of those moments. A decision that felt solid, a certainty that felt earned, a plan that seemed obvious until it wasn't, until new information arrived or a hidden variable surfaced or the world shifted just enough to break the model. And the shock isn't that we were wrong. The shock is how right we thought we were. Decisions are unavoidable. Certainty is not. Healthy systems expect revision. They leave room for friction. They treat doubt as maintenance, not weakness. They assume their first answer won't be their last, because the world doesn't stop changing just because the plan was written down. And reality doesn't care how reasonable something seemed once. So here's an ounce. The goal isn't to never be wrong. It's to stay reachable by new information, especially when things still feel solid. And that's it. An ounce, submitted for your consideration.